Okay, so welcome to another Coterie. Today, we are going to talk about 5 ways to deal with frustration as a parent. And as Mickey and I were looking through this list, we were like, oh, this could have been written really for teachers or anyone as well, anybody who works with kids. Um, but
Or
Mickey,
anybody just in a relationship.
yeah, if you're in a relationship of any sort. Um, so why don't we first define maybe what we mean by frustration. And Amy and Christine, if any point you want to jump in and ask questions or clarify or anything, feel free to. But Mickey, why don't we start with just defining what do we mean when we say frustrated?
Well, it's interesting because I looked it up just because we use that word a lot. We use annoyed and frustrated, and so I wanted to see what the dictionary actually defined it as, and they define it as the feeling of being upset or annoyed, especially because of inability to change or achieve something. Kind of like yoga. You
Yeah,
get frustrated because you can't do a pose or you can't do
yeah,
anything else that we're trying. So I thought that was interesting, and it found it might be helpful to maybe think of that as we're framing frustration, what that looks like and what that means.
yeah.
So we all have like language.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I like the thought of it's really the inability to change someone. And as we were talking today, we said really we don't have the ability to change anyone, which is
Yeah,
frustrating in and of itself. Just knowing that we really can't change someone else,
yeah.
um, especially being in relationship, that is a source of frustration for sure. So first, the first one on our list here of the 5 ways to deal with it is to accept your child as they are, not as you are. That was a Freudian slip right there.
That would be part of the problem, is
That
what?
would be part of the problem, but
Yeah,
to really accept your child as they are. And I know that can be really hard in a lot of family units because
yeah.
we come in all shapes and sizes. And I was reading something about family fit and how some kids cannot be a good fit with their family because in this context it was talking about you could have a family of introverts and they have a super extroverted child, and so that parent child fit isn't necessarily there, and how isolating that can feel for the child, but also how frustrating that can feel for a parent. But really, how do we accept kids for who they are and where they're at?
I think going back to what you said, Kelly, was really identifying and understanding they're not going to be like me. And I'm so grateful for that I had 3 kids that were not like me, because one is plenty. But to identify, I mean, it would be easier or harder, I guess, if we were all the same. I don't know. Which one would it be? I'm not sure.
Don't,
But um,
don't they say it's
and
harder
as
and you get most frustrated with people who are the most like you?
right,
'Cause
or
you
that are
see all of
completely
your
opposite of
flaws
you. Yeah,
outside of your
I
body.
yeah, exactly. So one of the things is really to identify who your kids are. I mean, and the way we can do that is really observing them, just watching them. And I always, Kelly and I talk about this a lot, of when in the New Testament, Jesus said a lot, I think 38 times or something like that in just the gospels, of Jesus noticed or Jesus saw or Jesus looked. And so he looked at, just watched people, watched situations around them. And we don't spend a lot of time as parents just observing our kids. We always want to jump in. We always want to, fix something, especially as moms. We are really the protectors of, we that's kind of the of what we do when we watch kids. But what would happen if you just spent 15 minutes a day and just watched and observed your kids for the sole purpose of finding out who they are? Because I know as an adult, one of the things that I fall into the trap of is assuming that I know this person, or assuming I know my kids, and they're all grown adults now. But so really just observing them. paying attention to their passions, paying attention to how they solve things, paying attention to what is difficult for them. So all those ways of finding out who your child is. And then being okay with that. Now, if they're liars and thieves and, that maybe not so much, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about who they are at the core of who they are. So that would be a first place to start. And what I know about, excuse me, my allergies are so bad today. I know how unprofessional that is. It's either that or blowing my nose all the time. So I know you'll be gracious. One of the things that I hear all the time from kids is that they want to be seen and they want to be heard. And so how do we do that as parents?
Isn't that a core value we all have?
Yeah.
And I think, it's interesting because sometimes you have the kid who is a pleaser. Growing up, I was really a pleaser. And so who I was trying to mirror back what I thought my parents wanted. And I think that there are a lot of kids that fall into that. And I don't know how you do it, but the feeling for a pleaser is if I don't mirror them well enough, then maybe I'm not worthy of love. Maybe, so how to create that sense of belonging and safety to be your own person and not a mini me, I think is an interesting challenge, especially, my brother was the opposite. So it was really easy for him to be like his own person and totally rebel. And in adulthood, it's funny because we've kind of flip-flopped where he really is more interested in kind of towing the line and doing exactly what my parents maybe would prefer he do. And I'm a little bit more like, well, let's question that everything now,
Yeah.
So
it's interesting, Kelly, because I was reading in two different books. One book was really our imperfections are gifts, and that's by Brene Brown of Gifts of Imperfection. And then the other one is that Eliminating Hurry, and I can never remember the whole title, but John Mark, is that his name? John Mark Comer?
Yep.
Comer. But he says about embracing our limitations as well, because our limitations are actually how we find our perseverance and find our strengths. And so I think it's interesting how we switch it around. Instead of embracing some of those imperfections or embracing some of those limitations, we try to fight them. And we raise these expectations way higher than is probably realistic for some of us. And so that's a difficult part for parents as well.
I think there's another side to accepting your child as they are, and that is, and I heard this from some parenting something, but just talking about how when we have kids, it's almost the embodiment of all of your anxieties and worries outside of your body. And I think of a lot of the protective nature and instinct that parents have. I wonder how much is tied to, your own anxieties, insecurities, whatever. And it's walking out in the world away from, and there's no way to, like, when it's in you, you can protect, right? You can do things and orient your life. But when it's a little person with all their own, thoughts and feelings and ways of doing things, it changes a little bit how you can protect even.
It's so interesting because an example of that would be my greatest fear is not belonging, not being part of something, of being left out. I have a child that growing up, they didn't have that fear at all. And they were incredibly vulnerable, but incredibly confident and authentic of who they were and what they did. And, wasn't afraid to dance around in public or, whatever it is. And chose to only have a couple of friends. It's not because they weren't likable, but that's all they needed. And so that was so difficult for me because growing up, I was like, the more the merrier, even though, so you had a lot of acquaintances. I'm not sure how many friends I had, but a lot of acquaintances. And I struggled with that one of my children was totally different than that. And I had to back off and say, but this works for them. And
Yeah.
I had a very wise mentor who said, Mickey, are you having a hard time with this because it is wrong, or is it because it is different than what you would do?
Mm,
And it's such a great lens to look at and to ask yourself, am I having a difficult time with this with my kiddo because it is wrong, or is it just different? And different is not always wrong.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
and so
I
that helps.
know over my years of in education, it's been interesting because a lot of times this accept your child as they are comes out in grades, right? So you have
Mhm.
the very type A like parent who, you know, strived and really cared about school, and then the kid who's like, I'm not jumping through those hoops for you. Like I'm not doing
Yeah.
it. And just seeing kind of that power struggle almost that leads to so much frustration on everybody's part, right? Mom and dad are frustrated, kids are frustrated. um, there's just not a lot of grace there.
Yeah. Yeah. And grace and flexibility are two words that we have at Anastasis for sure, but two words that as parents, absolutely. Because kids are, when you think that you have complete control over your children, well, they're going to do something and you're not going to have any control over your children. So the thing about accepting your child as you are, as they are, is really don't assume as well. Don't assume you know their motivation. It's really difficult to assign a motivation to somebody else because that we can look through their lens, but we don't know for sure what their motivation is. So to have those conversations, one of the sentence stems that Kelly and I use a ton are I notice and I wonder. And so when you're even actually having a conversation with your child, I noticed that you are choosing, this is one that I used with my kids. I noticed that you are choosing not to put your clothes in drawers or anything. So I'm wondering what that's about. And I finally got out of them that they didn't really want the dresser in their bedroom. And so we decided that the boundary was you have to organize them somehow. They got to choose, but we got rid of all the dressers. It was really interesting. And it would have been really easy for us to go, no, you've got to have a dresser. I don't know why that's in a parent handbook, but no, you've got to have a dresser. So our boundary, our sacred ground was, okay, you've got to organize it somehow. And so one of them organized it with hangers. One of them organized it in, and I think I told this story before, but one of them organized it in recycling containers, clean, I might add. And then one actually chose to keep theirs in a dresser because they liked it behind so that people couldn't see it, crammed in there, but people couldn't see it. And it was amazing though, because my perception was they were just being lazy.
Mm-hmm.
But in further of, I noticed and I wondered, because I do wonder a lot because I'm so confused with children sometimes. I really am wondering what is going on in their head. And so they would just say, no, I just don't see the need. I don't see the need of it. Okay, great. Well, then let's come up with something else.
Yeah, taking up too much floor space with that dresser.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And they did not care that anything matched. So I needed to get rid of that. I needed to let go of that. And that was humbling for me for sure.
Yeah. And that accepting your child as they are is really not resisting, which, what I heard with the frustration is you're frustrated because you're resisting something, you're wanting them to change. And so
Yeah.
really the first one is non-resistance, to just let them be who they are.
Right. And one of the things that I very lovingly ask parents is, whose problem is this? And more times than not, if parents are really being honest, they'll say, I am making this my problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the frustration comes in, because there's a reason why kids act the way they do. And I'm not defending all kids' behavior, but there's a reason why sometimes they act the way they do. And it's because they're trying to tell you something. We're just not listening. And so is this my issue that I'm causing a problem with and making this a big hairy deal? Or is this my kids' issue that we need to dig a little deeper with? It's a little bit humbling for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So once you have accepted your child for who they are,
Yeah,
no small task.
no small task.
The second way to really deal with frustrations as a parent is to allow your own emotions.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we've been talking a ton at school with the kids and staff about emotions, specifically using Mark Brackett's permission to feel and his mood meter and the ruler method. Can you talk a little bit about why the emotions are a piece of that?
yeah. So the mood meter is can you kind of just show it, Kelly? Do you have
I
a little
can
bit close?
just share my screen here.
Okay.
There we go. Can you see it?
Yep. So the mood meter comes out of Yale Center for Emotional Health, and Mark Brackett is the director of that. And he talks about, in his book Permission to Feel, talks about 4 quadrants that we typically ping pong back and forth. And one of the things that he talks a lot about is how we are emotionally illiterate, that we usually have mad, sad, bad, glad, um, and we don't really know how to label our emotions. So if you look at this mood meter, and our kids are at Anasasis are getting really good at this,
Mhm.
and they do a morning check-in. How are you feeling? And they can't just say fine, because fine is not a feeling. They pick kind of the quadrant that they are in, and they are learning age appropriate words to feelings to add to their mood meter on their wall that they have. And if you'll notice, the going from bottom to top, there is energy. And so when you get into the red quadrant or the yellow quadrant, those are really high energy quadrants, and they includes feelings like concerned, troubled, repulsed, which is all in the red zone. And then over in the yellow, it is focused, we're exhilarated, we're ecstatic, we're excited. And so it's not that one is a positive high energy and one's a negative high energy at all. Mark Brackett's whole work is about all feelings are valid. And honestly, God created every one of those feelings. So how can any of them be bad? It's just that we've been conditioned to think that some feelings are bad and some feelings are good. And so if you look at this, I don't know if you can tell, the yellow is a little bit harder to see, but it is as what do they call that, Kelly? Variegated, what do they call that? Where it gets lighter to
Oh,
darker.
gradient. Yeah, gradient.
Yeah. And so if you start like in the middle 2 columns of yellow and red, you'll see that lighter, and then they go a little bit darker. That means that they are going from left to right or going from middle to outside. That is the level of pleasantness. With high pleasantness, if you're around people that are in that yellow or green, they'll be a little bit more pleasant to be around than the people that may be in extreme red or extreme blue. And so you can see how the words, even as you read them, as they go from the center on out of any of those quadrants, that you'll see they are a little bit more pronounced going down the continuum. So if you look at in the red zone where frustrated is, it's actually almost in the middle. It's in that 3rd column, going from the right or left, but it's second from the top. And so frustrated, you're pretty energetic if you think about that. And you might not be all that pleasant if you think about it that way. It's not a bad thing. But the whole idea being is, if we can name, I am frustrated, instead of I'm just mad or I'm ticked off or whatever, I am frustrated. And where is it that you want to get to? Do you want to get more over to the yellow, or do you want to get more over to the green, or do you want to get more over to the blue? So basically the point of this being is that it gives a very specific language and helps us identify and understand what it is, the specific feeling that we are feeling at that time, rather than just say I'm mad.
Well, and a lot
Because
of
when
times he talks about, we'll say frustrated or stressed, but when we really stop and observe the feeling and we take some time with it, what we'll realize is, oh, I was I was afraid, right?
Mhm,
Something was, or I'm worried, or I'm, um, shocked, or there's so many
mhm,
other words that maybe more accurately capture than
mhm.
frustrated. And the more accurate that we get, the more we can really get a handle on what it is we are experiencing and then how to respond to it.
Yeah, because one of the things that we are knowing about when we are studying more social emotional health, once we name the feeling that we are feeling, we can move forward. But if we try to fight that feeling, if we've been conditioned, women aren't supposed to be angry, women aren't supposed to be enraged. If we fight that, we end up getting stuck more in that feeling. And whatever loop is playing in our head, I'm going to sneeze in just a minute. Hang on. I'll keep talking till I get it out. One of the things, so we can, that loop of language that keeps circling on in our head, that can help us stay stuck. But if I can say, I am frustrated with this behavior, and what can we do and what can we do to move forward? What can we do to fix it? What can we do to whatever it is? Then I've also made kind of an action plan. And once you make an action plan, it helps you move forward. So that's the whole idea behind a mood meter. And when we ask adults, we ask, how are you feeling? Or what are you feeling today? And the idea that we can feel 3 or 4 different emotions at the same time for 3 or 4 different reasons is totally okay. Because the
Particularly in
feelings,
2020.
pardon me?
Particularly in 2020.
Yes, particularly in 2020. And the idea being that your feeling is not your identity. Your feeling is just that snapshot of what you are feeling right now. But it doesn't mean that I'm not, I'm not sad. Part of me is feeling sad. And that's a very different language that we're trying to help families, and we're trying to help our kids and staff even look and think a little bit differently.
Yeah, what I like about the mood meter, even as kids are getting out of the car in the morning sometimes, and I'll say, how you doing today? And they'll say, I'm definitely starting in blue, and they can identify it's because I'm tired, right? And
Right.
what's going to happen when you walk in? Well, when I get in my classroom, I'll probably go to green or yellow, because then I'll be with my friends, right? So they're even starting to identify some of those things, but to realize, um, you'll hear them say, part of me is this color and part of me is this color, or I'm a little bit this and a little bit this. And I love that they're even starting in, as they're reading things, reading books and different things, they're identifying where the characters are on the mood meter, which I think is great as well.
And the idea really that if you are in red, that's not a bad thing, because a lot of times we need to be in that red quadrant to because of our passion. Um,
Yeah,
we
change
need to.
doesn't happen when
It's
you're in the green.
right. Yeah.
Change happens when you're in the red, right? You've
Yeah.
got to be upset enough about something that you're like, I'm going to do something about it. Where in you're green,
Right.
you're just kind of
Right.
apathetic to it. Michelle, what were you going to say?
I was going to say sometimes I'd read somebody talk about this morning about how we designate people as a good person or a bad person, or I want to be a good person, I don't want to be a bad person, and it connects to all of this too, because there isn't really such a thing as a good person or a bad person, or a good
Right.
or a bad kid. It's all on choices that we make every single day, and where we are and what's happening in our surroundings. So being able to take those judgment calls away here, and again, looking at the mood meter, this isn't about judgment about what we see in you, it's how you perceive yourself. And yeah, there isn't, you should be able to experience a whole spectrum
Mm-hmm.
feelings rather than, well, you should always be happy. Well, no, you shouldn't. We know better
Right.
than-
Right. And,
Yeah.
and for us
And-
too, to remember as the adults in the room that we're allowed to experience that full range of emotions, and that's okay. And to help identify it with our kids. You know, um, my mom frustration is what is maybe expressed out loud, but when you really drill down to it with her, it's usually that she's nervous or irritated, right? She's
Yeah.
worried about us, she's nervous about something, or she's irritated, and it just comes out as frustration.
It's interesting because the kids have really latched onto this uh, really well, because they love the idea that they can be way more specific with how they are feeling. And the idea being that, the more specific we can be, the more we can understand or determine what it is that's causing us to feel that way. And which is a part of the kind of the next one, but how it is that we can move forward then. If I've identified what it is I'm feeling and why it is that what is causing me to feel this way, then I can kind of make an action step again of moving forward. So it is a really empowering kind of thing. And again, it takes away the judgment. Like Michelle said, it takes away the judgment of this is not a bad or a good feeling. It is just what I am feeling right now.
Yeah,
And
I like that the separation of emotions too. When you name them, you can separate the emotion you're feeling inside with what your child is doing on the outside, right?
yeah,
What part of this is me and happening and the story I'm telling in my own body versus what's actually happening with my child.
yeah, and one of the strategies was to take a step. I take a step back. I take a step back, literally, so I know. It kind of gives me that pause, but this strategy suggests that you just stop and you take a breath. And every single thing that we research says it starts with the breathing, because we all have it. We all can at least be aware of it. And when you are breathing, when you are focused on your breath, it's difficult to focus on a lot of other things, because it's so singularly focused. So to stop and take a pause, there is great power in the pause. And we don't always feel comfortable with that pause, but inhaling and exhaling a couple of times actually will slow down a lot of that emotion, for sure. So that's all part of that.
So Amy, all that good work you were doing in that breath yoga,
Yes.
all part of it. So Mickey, you briefly even touched on the next one, which is know the 90-second rule. And really that's connected directly with the emotions. So when you are feeling something, to really let yourself feel it. What happens when we don't let ourselves feel it, when we resist?
Well, neuroscience tells us that really we're not meant to fight it. If we go with it, it is actually, if we go with it, we can be through that emotional upheaval in less than 2 minutes. Now, we all know how long 2 minutes can be or seem like. It seems like forever. But if you get stuck, we know that we can be stuck with a certain feeling for days. And some of us may have a feeling that for years, who knows, if we don't go forward with it. But depending on what emotion that is, oftentimes our fight or flight, it's an amygdala response, and it can actually add to our anxiety. But if we can name it, and again, think about what it is that's causing it and what it is that we can do to move forward with that, then actually our brain kind of resets and we can go back into rational thinking mode rather than emotional reaction mode, because we want to remember to respond, not always react.
Yeah.
And reaction is emotion driven and responding is thinking brain driven.
And really, we resist the emotion, we get stuck in that feeling. And if you let yourself experience the feeling, what the neuroscience shows is just what you said. within 90 seconds, you've passed through it. Where if you are trying to put on a happy face or push it down, that actually that's where the trouble begins to stem, and everything builds until you snap and can't handle it anymore.
Well, it's interesting because we're reading this book. I actually am reading most of it to Kelly, but it's mind-boggling to me is how to rewire your brain uh, if you're anxious. And so it is amazing because it was talking about how quickly there's amygdala anxiety, and then there's cortex, your thinking part of your brain, anxiety. And amygdala is just that reaction, that fight or flight kind of thing. And how much faster the amygdala works than our cortex works. And it was fascinating because you sit there and went, wow, I can try to be rational, but my fight or flight is going way faster than my rational, which is why we end up saying things and doing things to our children and with our children that we probably shouldn't. And so thinking about breathing, which slows down the amygdala and actually energizes the cortex, is a really great way to actually get back some of that control, that frustration, the definition of frustration that you've actually lost control, if that makes any sense at all whatsoever. But again, and I think another piece of that, Kelly, is that we're afraid sometimes as parents to be honest with our kids and to be truly authentic of saying, you know what, I am really frustrated right now. And I'm frustrated. And this is why a part of me feels frustrated. A part of me feels frustrated because I came home from work again today and everything was, not everything, the toy room was in shambles. So that's really frustrating to me. I need to take a pause and then we're going to talk about what might happen. And that's okay for us to do that because that is a logical, that's naming it. It's telling why I'm frustrated and then what is our action plan. And then it gives me permission to take a break.
Yeah. I was thinking too, um, when you tell kids, I'm really tired and grumpy and I had a long day, it also, going back to that first one of accepting your child as who they are, it signals to your child if you are snappy with them or maybe have a shorter fuse that, oh, mom's feeling these emotions, right?
Yeah.
That are grumpy and tired. And it's not really about me, it's about what else happened in her day. And so I think it helps continue that sense of belonging that kids feel when they know that, my short temper or my frustration is not necessarily aimed at you. You just got sucked into the whirlwind of how the day went.
Right. And it's okay to model that authenticity. It's okay to model that vulnerability because that's sending a way stronger message than saying, oh, I'm fine. And your body language and your tone of voice and the way you are snarky with the kids says anything but. And so one of the greatest gifts that we can give to our kids is really, we don't have to spill everything, but we can say, and I have families that actually have this mood meter on their refrigerator and they actually go over to the mood meter and find the word that is really the most dominant feeling right then. Because the idea being is that I can feel all kinds of feelings, but the one that's really sucking me dry right now is that I'm incredibly irritated or whatever it is, or I am so excited I can't hardly stand it,
Right.
and model that as well.
Well, and a lot of times I feel like when we get frustrated with kids, we're frustrated with the emotion that is being expressed in the moment. And a lot of times the emotion that's being expressed is anger or mad or sad or, one of those base emotions is what's coming out. And so we want to rush in and fix that for them. But really, if we help them really understand their own emotions and dive down, what we might find and what we found here is it's coming out as anger and fury, but really I'm embarrassed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or really I'm anxious about something or I'm panicked. A lot of times it's not really that it's anger, it's one of those other emotions. It just comes out as anger. And so even helping the kids to identify that emotion so that you can respond to what's actually happening and not just the behaviors that you.
Right.
And the behavior is it, right? A lot of times the behavior isn't even coming close to matching what
Right.
the emotion is. I
Yeah.
remember one of my little guys one year just started crying and he's like, I don't know why I'm crying right now. And it wasn't because he was sad, he wasn't scared. It was he just finished an audition. He had all of that adrenaline going up through and it was overwhelming to him, which made him cry, and he didn't understand it, and that part was really scary for him. So helping him walk through, here's why you're feeling jittery right now and it's okay, you're in a
Yep.
safe place. But it was a behavior even he didn't understand, and we didn't know at first until we talked him through it.
Yeah.
That could be really scary.
He just sat down sobbing. I don't know why I'm crying right now. So the next one, the fourth way to really deal with frustrations as a parent is to parent from a place of gratitude. I have puppy breath coming straight at me right now. She's yawning. So parenting from a place of gratitude, what does that look like, Nikki?
Gratitude is also actually one of the best things that you can do to neuroscience about changing, it can wire the brain. Oftentimes we get in a rut of looking at the positive things. COVID has brought a lot of that out, of being negative, of what, nothing is going right, when in fact there's a lot of things that are going amazingly well, that we just are in that negative mindset. So when we choose to change our language and change the lens that we look through, gratitude actually is a real healthy strategy to, it actually helps send those positive endorphins from our brain. But looking at going, you know what, I feel this and I'm so grateful for this. So you can feel both of those. Actually, you can feel a negative feeling, but you can also be incredibly grateful for something else. One of the things just a personal story, my daughter just gave birth to our second grandson. He's adorable, but we had a little bit of a scare. She had to go back into the hospital and it was scary. And the negative part was, you know what, we're incredibly sad and concerned and frustrated with the doctors and yada, yada, yada. But we are so grateful for this happening at this time of the year because we had people that could be flexible with their schedule. And so it's not that you just deny all the negative stuff, the stuff that's scary, but to turn it around and say, but what are we grateful for in the midst of that? And that's what is the healthy part. And gratitude, instead of going, oh, I have to go pick up my daughter, it's, oh my gosh, I get the privilege of going to pick up my daughter for the 35,000th time. No, you wouldn't say that, but for at ballet, because it really is a privilege to be able to do that for our kids. And it's amazing how even the change in language will change actually your attitude about doing a very humdrum kind of task or chore. Oh, I can't do this because I've got to go do this. No, I get the privilege of doing that. And once we again change that language, it begins to change our attitude, and we are more grateful.
Yeah, I was thinking too, we know this amazing monk that we've known for years, this Hindu monk named Tushta, that our students have had the privilege of getting to spend time with over the years. And I'll never forget, he was talking to, I think, just a group of teachers one year and said, he has I don't know, 24-month-old or something, and is still not sleeping all the way through the night and waking up and fussy and whatever. And he said, one of the other teachers said, yeah, it's really hard when they're that age and you're not getting enough sleep and all of those things. And he paused for a moment. And if you've ever seen him, he's just that kind of human that immediately your countenance feels better around him because he's thoughtful. But he paused and he said, I really cherish the time that I have with my son when it's just the two of us and it's completely quiet and there's no distractions in the middle of the night. And just that complete shift of not focusing on, I'm not getting any sleep, this kid is a disaster, they're still not sleep, like
Yeah.
how precious those moments are where it's just the two of us and we're just
Mhm.
sitting together, and there's nothing to distract us because it's the middle of
Mm.
the night. And I just love that. And I think, that gratitude can be around us all the time, and we forget to look for it because we are in a culture that tells us everything should be um, pleasant all the time, and that it should go exactly how we want, and we get to demand when and how that looks instead of really embracing where we're at in any given moment.
Yeah. It's actually a real an art form to be able to frame that, to look at, here is this situation, here is this event that I could be complaining like everybody else can, or I can reframe it and find the sweet gift in it. And that's a craft for sure.
Yes, my
And
mom
some
is
people
such
do,
a master at it. She even said they just went on a trip and they got stuck in some hurricane tropical storm kind of weather, and the Airbnb they were staying started flooding. And my mom sends my brother and I pictures, and she goes, "Look, it's another adventure," because they're just such the Griswolds when we travel. But she's like, "Look at the stories we'll have to tell this year." Like she's just like, it's frustrating, but she's almost like giddy about it because it's just like we have this great adventure that we're on now.
well, you think about what adventure would be if everything went according to plan.
Right. There is.
Now, I know that there's some of you out there that would go, yes, but I would love that. Thank you very much. If everything went according to my plan, because then I'd be in my happy place.
We think that could be. Yeah, we think that could be the case for sure.
Well, the other thing is sometimes when we start practicing, I get to, or I have the privilege to, whatever, comes across as sarcastic at the beginning. Keep at it, because you'll actually start believing what you're saying. So again, it takes practice every day. It's not a one-time shot. Practice it for sure.
So the last one, just in the interest of time, is applying a growth mindset to parenting. First of all, let's talk about what a growth mindset is, and I will share my screen again.
Yeah. Maybe.
How's that?
So, and Michelle probably can maybe explain this a little bit better, but we used to think that mindset was fixed. And what we know to be true now is that it really isn't. And we're going to find a better copy of all of these. So please know that, and we're going to put that on our resource page under the parent. Does it go under the parent section, Kelly? Is that where we're putting them?
And we'll share it on Facebook and things too.
Yeah. So it really is that we can change the way that we think. We can change the way that we address things. A growth mindset uses language like, I was wrong, I need help, those kinds of things, just very simple difference in language as well. But this kind of gives you some examples of what you can do with your own child to talk about it. And instead of always asking questions that end in yes and no, which doesn't take very much thought. And also it puts an end to a conversation. How was your day today? Fine. And then you're done. Or did you have a good day? No. Okay, it's done with that conversation as well. So really to try to keep your kids in thinking mode. It takes a little bit longer to actually have a conversation with your kids because you have to actually think about how you're going to phrase a question. But have a discussion with your kids about their day. It was a great way to start. And it gives this sheet, and I don't know if you can read it very well because it kind of gets fuzzy, but they have some really great examples of questions that you can ask. What did you learn today, or what mistake did you make today, and how did you handle it? We always go, well, what did you do well today? Instead of helping the kids focus on maybe what was the mistake they made today and what did they learn from it and what are they going to do differently next time. And that's where that growth mindset is not always focusing on what the grade was, or I got an A on my paper and we go, oh, great. How proud are you? Rather than turn it around and ask what was their struggle today.
Well, and it's super empowering too when kids start to learn a growth mindset and it's not fixed, right? Fixed mindset is I had the worst day ever and nothing can change it, and now I'm just in a bad mood. Where growth mindset would be I got really frustrated about this, but here's how I pushed through anyway.
Yep.
So it's really those soft skills that for a lifetime will really serve them well. And unfortunately, we've been raised in a society so long that was based more on a fixed mindset of performance and outcome and whatever, that it wasn't about failure is the greatest teacher. So when we can learn from those mistakes, from those failures, when we can talk them through, it's so much more powerful than just I got an A and it's done, or I got a D and it's done.
Yeah.
That's very grade specific, but even when I was growing up, how many times I heard, "You're so smart. You're so you're whatever," and really that's a lot of pressure to put on a kid to say you're so smart. And so instead praising the effort, or that they set a really ambitious goal, or not praising the outcome but praising the journey to get to wherever they got. And we're so conditioned again to focus on the outcome that even as parents, as the adults in the kids' lives, it takes a lot of thought to turn some of those words around.
Yeah, and we think a lot about our natural gifting, and there isn't a lot of effort sometimes put into that because it is a natural gifting. And that's what Kelly was saying about, we have one kiddo that's an amazing athlete. He didn't have to work very hard at it. But it was amazing because he had great coaches as well that said, you are a great athlete. However, to get to the next level, this is what you need to do. And it's the process. And it wasn't, and so it was a wake-up call to him, because everything came pretty easy for him. Because everybody went, oh, you're a great athlete, blah, 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 and moved him on. But when he had to actually work, if you want to get to this level, these are the things that you need to put in place. And that changed his mindset. Ooh, I've got to work at this. I can't just sit back and rest on my athletic ability if I really do want to get to the next level. So the idea that really our brain grows through the challenges, through the mistakes, through the failures, because we are forcing ourselves to problem solve, to do some critical thinking, to think differently about when the next time this happens. And so the kids and the parents that have more of a growth mindset actually are more successful in their relationships as well. So
And whole
that
life
was,
long. Yeah, for sure. I think it also helps them change their internal dialogue, right? So a lot of
yes,
times when we fail as adults, and I know I can get stuck in this myself, is where we make a mistake and immediately start beating on ourselves. That was so stupid. Everybody's gonna think you're an idiot. Like all of those internal voices that start. And really, when you're in a growth mindset and you go, oh, well, that didn't work, but let's try that. It does change that dialogue from one of kind of beating yourself up or getting frustrated with yourself, to saying, what can I do to make that go different next time? Math was really hard today. What can I do differently tomorrow? Who could I ask for help? How could I support? I was really distracted today in class. How could I change that for tomorrow? I messed up and made mom and dad really upset because I said this to my little brother. How might I change that tomorrow? Right? It keeps you from being stuck in whatever that is and gives you a place to move, which I think, again, super empowering for kids, and maybe one of the hardest, because we're so not conditioned for that. At least I wasn't growing up.
Well, I think
go ahead, Michelle.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I think when my kids were, especially when they were teenagers, but even when they were younger than that, the boundaries that we had, and I wasn't always good at this, and I kind of was learning as I went, but the boundaries, they knew what a hard no was. And
Mhm.
when I was growing up, you didn't question why. It was yes or no, and that's it. And as as my kids started to grow, I realized that sometimes there were reasons that they needed to be able to negotiate something with me, if they could make a case and advocate for themselves at the same time. But then they also knew these are the rules that we have for a reason. And when I started approaching that in the classroom as well, it was like, wow, if I figured this out much earlier, this was
Yeah.
but that was, and it's funny because my youngest one would always try to push those boundaries because that's what she did. And I was like, have I ever changed my mind on this thing? And she's like, well, no, but I can convince you on other things. I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. And sometimes we had a laugh at it, like, no, you're not going to have, ice cream for dinner, those kind of things. But for other things, she was able to learn how to actually make points that were, coherent thoughts, and a good reason behind that. So it wasn't a total authoritarianism situation in our family. And that, because that's how I grew up, that took me a really long time to grow out of.
Mm.
Even telling them, you know what, I was wrong about that. You're right. We can change this. And it was more of they still could respect the fact that I'm their mom and I make the decisions for them, but sometimes with them. And that
Yeah.
was a very different experience.
And actually, that's that growth mindset of allowing that. Sometimes it's manipulation, but sometimes it's just the advocacy and okay, give it your best shot. Give me your best shot. And so that is, even letting go of some of that control is actually a growth mindset. And we know that those of us that can let go of some of that control, we actually get more control back, because it, and Michelle brought up a really great point of find out what your sacred ground is, find out where your hard no is no, and why it is a hard no, and have a rationalization, have a justification for that hard no, and then okay, everything else may be a little negotiable. Give us your best shot. And so that is that growth mindset as well. Because for every no, there's like thousands of yeses. And so we don't always focus on that as well. So it is really all about the language for sure.
Connecting it back to the emotions, how many times did I go home and I'm raging at the end of the day, right? I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I got embarrassed in front of a friend, I got, whatever happened in my day. And I go home and now I have to do, physics homework. And my mom hears all about how awful and terrible and how much I hate this physics teacher. And it wasn't about the physics teacher, right? So even moving the conversation, usually my mom was like, how great that you're learning to deal with difficult people, because you're going to have that a lot in life. But the growth mindset version of that would have been, so what would it look like if that was the perfect physics class? What would you change? How can you advocate for yourself? What could you, is it that? And then really picking it apart, I would have gone, well, nothing, because it's really about all these other things. I'm just stressed out, right?
Right.
It would have drilled down into the actual emotions that I was feeling, and not the reaction of, my mom calling the school and demanding this physics teacher get fired or something, which unfortunately I've had happen on the other end of things, being the administrator. But just that idea of how do you empower your kids in a healthy way that helps them really drill down to the base emotions that they're experiencing, but also gives them that growth mindset of, well, what could it look like? How could it change? What might be successful for you? Because sometimes it really is, it's just too loud in class. And so I didn't really hear what he was saying. And now I'm expected to complete this thing that I don't understand. And that would be a valid, we know that's actionable, right? And that's what growth mindset really does, is empowers and makes it actionable.
The difficult thing is that any of those conversations takes time.
I know.
And we don't all and parenting is not always convenient. And we all have our limitations, but the time invested in those conversations to slow down, to take a step back, to breathe, whatever all that is, the long lasting effects and impacts on your kids as desired outcomes as they leave your house. Hopefully they'll leave your house someday. But that is what you're growing. That's the process of parenting. And make time. Make time to observe your kids. Make time to ask those questions. Make time to just step back and pause. Take time for you. Take time. And all of it, you're right. It does. Sometimes we just want to fill in the answer because we don't have time to deal with all that other stuff. But we're going to encourage you to take that time, because it is a gift for sure to be present. And the things you find out about your kids, and the things, if you allow them to say or allow them to push back a little bit, or to try to give it their best shot to convince you of something, it's amazing what you find out about your kids. And it goes all the way back up to step number 1 is accept your kids for who they are. I always find it interesting because I have parents all the time tell me, oh, my child is strong-willed. Okay, which one of you is not strong-willed? So why would we expect our children to be anything but?
Yeah, they're their own people.
They're people. And are they strong-willed because they have the audacity to push back? Or is it a strong-willed because they have the audacity to think differently than we do? What is really causing them to be strong-willed?
Identify them that way.
Yeah. It always kind of cracks me up going, really? Because aren't we all strong-willed? We kind of inherited that from the garden, didn't we? I mean, didn't we all like, so, yeah.
I want to open up just for either questions or dialogue. Christine and Amy, if you want to talk about things that are frustrating in your homes that maybe you could speak into, happy to do that before we close out our session.
This is Amy. You guys, you kind of touched on, I've read the book 90 Seconds to a Better Life or a Happier Life. I can't remember which one it is, but it's a pretty dense book. Is there something similar, parenting related?
Michelle might have an idea on that.
I'm actually looking something up because I can't remember the title. So give me 2 seconds.
You looked like you were typing. Let me think about that. I don't know. Do you have one off the top of your head, Mickey, that's similar?
Because as I was reading that, I just thought, I wish I didn't find this out in my 40s. I wish I could, if somebody could boil that down to me for parenting, that would be really helpful.
So I know that in Permission to Feel, they do have one of their later chapters, and it's called Emotions at Home.
Okay.
And it's just a chapter of it, but I mean, the book is, there's the book.
The book's phenomenal.
It is.
Go through and think through.
And it has really some great strategies, great examples to use at home for sure. There is, let me think about that more. Michelle, probably, did you find what you're looking for, Michelle?
Yeah, so Carol Dweck did publish the mindset book for parents that I think is really helpful. It's very similar to the one that we read as educators, but there's another one. It's called The Book You Wish Your Parents Had Read by Philippa Perry. And I don't ever take any book like this is gospel truth or anything like that, other than the one that has gospel truth. But what I like about this one is it's coming from that the mindset of thinking through how you were raised and how it affects how you raise your children. And for me, that was something that was really big, recognizing the things that I struggled with the most as a child, and my parents did the best they could. I'm not complaining about my parents at all, but the things that I really felt hurt about as a child, I found myself repeating as a parent and as a teacher. And I didn't like that about myself. And I was like, why am I doing this? So and I don't remember if this is the exact book I read or if I read an excerpt from it, but it was really helpful to say, oh yeah, this is that conditioning that's in my brain and here's why. So I really like that.
Also, any book that you can read that has gives you some age appropriate what to expect. Not that any of those are a fine line, but any of like Michael Gurian's books are great with that, just because he talks about what to expect kind of physically, emotionally, psychologically, and to give you a little bit better idea of even looking through their lens of going, ooh, is this because this is what a typical 4-year-old does or a typical 8-year-old does? Or is this because they're really, high hard-headed and high strung and, whatever, strong-willed. And so it kind of gives you at least a starting place. Any of those child development kind of books will help at least give you a target to see if you're on target or not.
Okay, thank you for the suggestions.
Yeah, Robin Kristen Bell. I don't think it's a book. I think it's just an audio recording, maybe a audio series they did, but it was called Launching Rockets, and all about parenting and kind of their reflections through parenting. And I found it helpful as I reflected back in just my family dynamics, and even working with kids here. It was an interesting perspective and take on it that I thought was pretty brilliant. Thank you, Michelle.
Oh, Michelle, you're so brilliant. Brene Brown actually does, and it's just on Audible. It's kind of weird. It's not in print at all, but it is based on her gifts of imperfection, but through parenting. And that triggered when you were talking about Kristen Bell. Yeah. And it's only like 45 minutes, an hour. It's kind of an extended podcast almost, but it's really good as well. It gives you grace about being okay with not being a perfect parent. Go figure. And it's, if you have Audible to get just use a quick credit, but it's really good.
And they're good multitasking while you're folding laundry.
Right.
There you go.
For sure.
Sure. What is this folding of laundry I hear you saying?
What? Who is folding laundry?
It's a rare occurrence. It'll be jumbled in the drawer in 5 minutes. Don't worry.
Oh my gosh. I got to fold newborn, where everything's like this big. Oh my gosh. See, that's exactly the face I had, Michelle. It was like, oh my gosh, everything is like this big. But you forget that if you had a full load, how there are 35,000 items in a load, and you go, who thought this was a good idea? Anyway, so that was the only time I've really enjoyed my folding of laundry in the past, however long. So.
Any others before we close? Speaking of babies, I've got my sweet little baby here today.
Oh, sweet baby.
Look at that face.
Any name yet?
Kita.
Kita?
Kita, K-I-T-A.
What does it mean, Kelly? What did you find out it meant?
I already forgot, Mickey. I have arrived.
Oh.
I have arrived. Yes.
Isn't that perfect? Perfect.
Neil remember.
So, yeah. So again, just as a quick review, number 1 was accept your child as they are, allow your emotions. 3 is know this 90-second rule. 4 is parent from a place of gratitude. And 5, apply growth mindset to your parenting. All very simple things that take no time at all to learn.
They are a practice for sure.
Daily, yeah. For sure. Okay.
We're all practicing daily here too, so.
That's for sure.
Well,
any last thoughts,
for
questions?
Visiting with us? Yeah.
This is Amy. Just a reminder, or Christine, I don't know if you saw it in the newsletter, but a couple of us are going to meet up in the rear parking lot after drop off tomorrow for a little walk, just because we miss getting together as a community in person. So if you're able to, we're going to get in a couple steps while the weather's nice and
beautiful day.
Hello. Yeah.
That's great. Great idea, Amy. Thank you for doing that.
Amy, would you like me to send some communication out, just reminding people?
That'd be great.
I will do that.
Thank you. More the merrier.
Yeah,
Keep us
absolutely.
motivated. So
I think everybody's feeling a little bit of that disconnect since we aren't able to be all around each other all the time. So love that.
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks. You
too.
as well,
Bye.
guys.